welcome everybody. I can't see you, but I hope that you can see Ben and I. I'm Annie Everall and I'm Director of Authors Aloud UK, who are hosting this event. This event is part of an awesome day of activities for children and families, all celebrating reading together, which, as we all know, is really important. This is our first Authors Aloud UK event of the day, in partnership with Simon & Schuster, Ben's publisher, and ASCAL, the Association of Senior Children's and Education Librarians. So it really is my pleasure to welcome actor, comedian and children's author Ben Miller. Some of you will know him as the better half of Armstrong and Miller comedy duo, or the grumpy detective in the TV series Death in Paradise, or the daft sidekick with Rowan Atkinson in the Johnny English films. He also appeared in the film What We Did on Our Holiday with David Tennant and Billy Connolly. He did a guest spot on Doctor Who as the Sheriff of Nottingham. And of course, he was in the Paddington 2 movie. Many of our younger listeners will know him best as the author of the wonderful children's book, The Night I Met Father Christmas, something that I'm still trying to do. And he'll be, will be as excited as I am to hear about the brand new paperback book, The Boy Who Made the World Disappear, and what a treat that is. So at that point, can I sort of start to hand over to you, Ben, by asking you, well, why did you start writing children's books?
Thanks, Annie. And morning, everyone, and welcome from Morocco. As Annie said, I've been here for 4 months. And looking forward to getting home this weekend. So I think what started me off was having children, really. So I've got 3 children, Jackson, who's now 14, Harrison, who's 8, and my daughter Lana, who's 5. And I wanted to write a story for each of them where they were the main character in the story. And The Night I Met Father Christmas is about my oldest son. And this story is about Harrison, my middle son. And in it, I've got to tell you, the background to it is Harrison has a little bit of a temper. I wanted to write a story about him learning to deal with his anger, because I remember experiencing anger as a child and not quite knowing how to deal with it. I thought it'd be lovely to write a story about that. So in my story, Harrison goes to a birthday party and he kicks off at the birthday party, and instead of a balloon, at the end of the party, they give him a black hole on a piece of string. So basically, he then finds that anything that makes him angry, anything that makes him cross, he can just put it in the black hole, which solves his problems to start with. But then after a while, he starts to realize that he's put things that he really loves into the black hole, like, for example, his parents. And so he's got to find a way to get them out again.
Brilliant. So can we ask you maybe if you'll give us a little taste and read an extract from it for us?
I would love to. So this is a little bit from the very beginning of the book. So as I say, Harrison's at a birthday party. The party organizer, Shelley, has given the children like a space party. So everyone's dressed as different planets at the party. She does a brilliant thing where she projects all the stars on the roof of the village hall where they're having their party. But because there's a bully from school at the party, in fact, it's his birthday party, Harrison's got a bit anxious, and when he gets anxious, it makes him angry. And so he, as I say, he kicks off, and he really falls foul of Shelley, the party organizer. Anyway, so this is from the end. This is a little bit from when the party's just ending. Here we go. Hector's mother, it's Hector's birthday party. Hector's mother clapped her hands. Thank you all for coming to celebrate our dear little angel's birthday. I'm afraid it's time for everyone to go home now. but I think we might have some very special balloons for everyone to take with them, and a party bag too. Shelley? Of course, said Shelley. One by one, Shelley gave each child a party bag and a beautiful, shiny helium balloon in the shape of a planet. There was a stripy brown and yellow Jupiter for Hector Broom and a purple Venus for Persephone Brinkwater. Charlie Nwosu got a sky blue Neptune, Marcus Down an orange Saturn with pink rings, and Carl Ng a bluey green Uranus. Katie Broad got a silvery Mercury, which was very lucky because it matched her angel costume. Finally, it was Harrison's turn. Have you got a balloon for Harrison? His mother asked Shelley. Oh yes, said Shelley. Something flickered in her eyes. I've got a very special balloon for Harrison. Just wait here 1 minute. She disappeared into the kitchen, closing the door behind her. So what was your favourite bit of the party? Asked Harrison's father. When we saw the black hole on the ceiling, said Harrison. The sound of banging came from the kitchen. What's a black hole? Asked his mother. It's a hole in the universe, said Harrison. They're very dangerous because if you fall inside one, you'll never get out. Ooh, what do they look like? Like a hole, said Harrison, that's black. There was a whizzing sound from the kitchen, as if something was being put in a blender, then bang! The kitchen door blew clean off its hinges, sailed across the hall, slammed against the opposite wall, and clattered to the floor. There, framed in the doorway, was Shelley, the party organizer. Her spacesuit was covered in soot, and all her pink hair was on end. In her right hand was a piece of string, and floating at the end of it was a weird black circle. Are you okay? Asked Harrison's father. Here's your balloon, Harrison, said Shelley, tying the string to his wrist. Oh, very kind of you, said Harrison's mother. My pleasure, said Shelley. He deserves it. Harrison reached out his hand, took hold of the string, and pulled the balloon towards him. It was pitch black, like a piece had been cut out of the universe. He blew at it to see if it bobbed backwards like a balloon should, but instead it loomed ever so slightly closer. I wouldn't do that if I were you, Shelley warned. In fact, best not to touch it. Harrison's father gave her a quizzical look. In case it pops, said Shelley, smiling a big, innocent smile. Well, what do you say, Harrison? Asked his mother. Thank you, said Harrison politely. You're most welcome, Harrison, said Shelley with a glint in her eye. You're most welcome indeed.
Ooh. And the book just goes on and gets better and better. And I know that actually some of the science in there is actually factual science. So yes. What bits are factual and what bits have you used your imagination?
Well, I think black holes are amazing. I mean, black holes are real. That's real science. In fact, we wouldn't really be here if it wasn't for black holes, because there's a black hole in the middle of every galaxy, and there's a huge black hole in the middle of our galaxy, the Milky Way. And you can have a black hole any size. So the one in this story is the size of a balloon. You can have a black hole can be any, it can be microscopic up to, as I say, the enormous one at the middle of our galaxy to the size of a balloon. In the story, the black hole, basically Harrison has to keep feeding the black hole because it starts shrinking. If you don't throw anything in it, it starts to shrink. And that's also true in real life. In the book, it shrinks faster than a black hole does in real life. But it is true that black holes slowly shrink if nothing falls, if no new stuff falls into them. But all the, and there's one more thing that's different. If, you know, the edge of a black hole is the bit where if you touched it, you'd get pulled in, basically. it's called the event horizon. It's the sort of point of no return. So when you reach the black edge of a black hole, you can't come back from there. You're going to fall in. You can't do anything about it. For very, very big black holes, you probably wouldn't even notice when you crossed the event horizon, and you could easily fall in by mistake. For really small black holes, you get pulled in further out from the black hole horizon. But in the story, you have to touch it to fall in. So I kind of changed that. I sort of changed that slightly. But it is absolutely true that if you go too close to a black hole, you'll get pulled in. And it's also true that if you pass the event horizon, then you can't ever get back again. But Annie, there's this wonderful. Now this is really in the book, but it's very advanced. It's sort of very advanced physics, really. But there's Albert Einstein, two physicists called Einstein and Rosen. So Albert Einstein came up with he created the way that we have of describing black holes. So he created this thing called general relativity. And Rosen found a solution of it, that if the black hole is spinning, you can maybe fall in and come out again at an earlier time. So that is absolutely, it's so funny. In the book, it's called a wormhole. You know, I mean, maybe you've heard of wormholes. You get them in Star Trek and other things. So that's formed when a black hole spins and you fall in and you end up coming out of the black hole before you fell in it, or into another part of the universe. And that's called a wormhole or an Einstein-Rosen bridge. And that's also in the story.
And that will keep me thinking, where might I want to re-emerge? So, and there's the thread for other stories.
Yes. Yeah.
As I said at the beginning, you know, this is about celebrating reading together, and the whole day is about reading together. So, do you read to your children, and you know, do you enjoy that, and why do you think it's important?
I love it. I absolutely love it. I mean, I'm an actor. I suppose I'd say any chance to do voices, but also my parents read to me a lot when I was a child, right up until I was a teenager, actually. So, you know, I plan to do the same for my kids. Yes, and I think that's why I wanted to write stories. I love reading to them. We're reading Bar at the moment, which is absolutely brilliant. It's been fantastic. Lana loves it. So what I do when I'm writing the stories is I also read them a lot to my children. They're read, as you know, hopefully came across just now when we read that bit. They're very much written to be read out loud. So I try and have nice short chapters. I try and have, you know, I try to have a going to bed point after every 3 chapters, where it's, you know, just so you're not ending on too much of a sort of cliffhanger. So I have a couple of cliffhangers, and then I have hopefully a sort of going to bed chapter. Yeah, I very much, you know, I very much enjoy reading to my children. The second part of your question, why is it so important? I think it's slightly mysterious, isn't it, really? Because we all know that reading to your children has huge benefits. We know that children reading to themselves has enormous benefits. I don't think the research has really been done yet on why. I guess that's quite a hard experiment to do. So it's all guesswork. But I think it's got to help language, hasn't it? It's got to help the way that you learn to form sentences, that you learn grammar, and you learn the most important thing of all, which is to try and express yourself and your feelings. And that's what my story is about, really, because I think the challenge for all of us is to try and think clearly, but also to be able to feel our feelings and know what we're feeling, and to be able to share that and communicate that with ourselves and with other people. That's a lifelong I mean, certainly for me, that's a lifelong journey. And I think you're off to a really good start if you read, because reading lets you see the world through lots of other people's points of view as well. So it teaches you empathy, it teaches you a way to express yourself, and it is amazing for your imagination. And the last thing I would say about why I think reading is so good is that stories are different. I can sit down, you know, we can have this conversation, and we're having a conversation on a certain level, aren't we? It's stories go much deeper. There's something subconscious going on with stories that we can't, they're like dreams in a way, in that they are a way of our whole minds dealing with a subject or learning something. And by listening to stories and telling stories and reading stories, we also satisfy things that are going on in our unconscious mind that otherwise we can't reach. So they kind of, I always think a story, you know, when your engine's broken, you know, imagine you could never look at the engine. You could only sort of put your hand under the bonnet and try and figure out what's going on. A story can fix what's under the bonnet.
That's a nice image. I think maybe at that point, it's a good time to ask our audience if they have any questions. So, Bev, could you manage the questions for me, please?
I certainly can. So I've opened up the chat box now so that people can ask questions. So please do feel free to put your questions into the chat box. If you click on the speech bubble down at the bottom of the screen, that will take you into the chat box.
Do we have any questions? People might
be...
yeah. Oh, do you...
Shall I read the question? From Chris Papula, do you think you'll ever write books for young adults? I don't know. I mean, I've got a story actually. I've got a young adult story that I would really, really love to write. But at the moment, I'm really, really loving. I guess maybe when my kids are a little older, I might write some young adult stories. And that would probably be one of them. But at the moment, I love writing for this age group, 8 to 12. It's just the most magical reading age. You guys, you 8 to 12ers, you are the best readers anyone could ever hope for, because you really put your whole imagination in when you read stories, and you love stories. I think once you get to sort of young adult, you kind of like stories that are a bit more realistic and a bit more grounded in the real world, and that's great. But in this reading group, you love wacky stories, and I love writing them. So, how old were you when you started writing? Well, this is from EC. Mysterious EC. How old were you? Well, I think you mean I'm sure you mean when I started writing books, and I didn't start writing books until about 10 years ago, actually. Before that, I mainly wrote comedy sketches. So I did always make my living as a writer, but it was writing comedy sketches before. Deborah Down, why did you choose space for your story? Well, that's easy. Harrison loves space, and so do I. And I wanted to write a story that he'd love to read. H. Flint, is this the first book you've written? That's from Charlotte in Year 6. It's not actually. I wrote a book called The Night I Met Father Christmas before this one. I'm writing one at the moment. It's on the wall here behind me. That's my plan for the book I'm writing for my daughter, which is called The Day I Fell into a Fairy Tale. It's not finished yet. And before that, I wrote some science books, actually, because I love science. Lucy Chapman, how do you get started? Do you plan it out? Well, yeah, I mean, that's it there. I like to, yeah, I like to see it. I write sort of a mind map, I suppose, and I go from there. If you don't know what mind maps are, you should definitely check those out, because they are a really, really great way of sort of ordering your thoughts, basically. What kind of book are you writing next? I'm writing a book about my daughter who discovers, Lana, as she discovers that there's a secret door that leads to her favorite fairy tales in her local supermarket. Will there be a sequel to The Boy Who Made the World Disappear? That's Martha at East Farley Primary School. Though there's not going to be another, I know what you mean. By a sequel, I guess you mean the same characters in another story. The next book is kind of a sequel because Harrison is in that too. Although in the next book, Harrison is now a teenager, and Lana is now 9. So in this next story is a sequel. What was your first book and what was it about? It's called The Night I Met Father Christmas, and it's about a boy who wakes up to meet Father Christmas, gives him such a shock that Father Christmas twists his ankle, can't deliver the presents. So the boy goes with Father Christmas around the world to help him deliver all the presents, because he can't, because he's twisted his ankle. And as they go, Father Christmas tells him the story of how he became Father Christmas. What was your favorite book as a child? Winnie the Pooh. I absolutely love those. Funny enough, Winnie the Pooh is one of those books you can read whatever age you are, but I loved them when I was little. I used to think Piglet was so funny. Who's your biggest inspiration as a writer? I think it would be A.A. Milne, yeah, the writer of Winnie the Pooh. I mean, I think I can't write like that, but I just love how funny he is, how clear he is, how brilliant the stories are, and I love the drawings in Winnie the Pooh. They're amazing. Salimaya from Court Farm School asked if you could read the rest of your story to her class, please. Thank you.
Perhaps Mr. Osborne could do that.
Mr. Osborne, yeah, check Mr. Osborne. What inspired you to start writing books? I think it was reading so many fantastic stories to my children at night, and I thought after a while you start to think, if you're a writer, you start to think, maybe I could write a story, maybe I could read mine, so it's really being inspired by all the brilliant children's books that there are. What would you put into a black hole? Good question. I think right now I would put the coronavirus in a black hole. Hi, my class would love to know what you're thinking about writing next. So yes, as I say, it's a story. It's really about fairy tales, and it's about the sort of fairy tales, the German fairy tales, the older ones, that are much kind of scarier than the ones that we have now. So what happens in this story is this mysterious supermarket appears on the edge of the village, and Lana goes there with her mother and finds this door. But the fairy tales that it takes her into are the older type of fairy tales. So not the Disney ones, the ones that came before. And they can be quite scary. So it's a kind of, she has to be really, really brave to succeed in the story. So it's kind of about how brave she is. And also she's not getting on great with Harrison, her brother, and going through into the fairy tales together makes them become friends again. Hi Ben, it's great to have you talking to us. Will your children sign up to the summer reading challenge this summer? Yes, they will. Now I know about it. Yes. I will check that out. Thank you. Karen Albert, we've just finished your book yesterday. What's the best way to find inspiration? From Bobby and Elliot at East Farley Primary. That is a good question, and I wish I knew the answer. Yeah, what's the best way to find inspiration? I think, if I knew that, if I really wish, if you ever find out, let me know. I think, reading helps. Reading a lot helps for sure. And thinking about the sort of story, I mean, it happens every different way, doesn't it? With my first book, The Night I Met Father Christmas, the whole thing popped into my head when I was walking my dog. Walked my dog for 10 minutes. And by the time I came back at the end of 10 minutes, I had every single bit of the story. That's never happened to me before, and it's never going to happen to me again. Yeah, I tell you what it's like. It's a bit like, I always think it's maybe a bit like archaeology, where someone sees a little tiny thing just poking out of the earth. They think, oh, I wonder if that's a stone or something else. And they start brushing away at it. And they think, oh, no, it's the end of a bone. And then about 15 years later, they've brushed it all away. They discover it's a dinosaur. But you don't know what it is to start with. I think it's a bit like that. Or it's a bit like standing on the roof with a TV aerial trying to get a signal. Do you write any non-fiction books for children? From Max, Matilda and Sam. I would love to. One day I'd love to write some science books for children. I made a science TV series for children, which you could watch. It's called Horrible Science, and it's on Amazon. How many books have you had published? Well, I did a comedy book. I did 2 science books. I did 2 children's books. That's 5. What was your second book, and what was it about? My second book was a science book. It's science. It's basically aimed at teenagers, and it's a book about the whole of science, really. All my favorite bits of science. From Johnny Kennedy, have you ever had writer's block? And if so, what's your best way to overcome this? I have nothing but writer's block. You could say, are you ever able to write? Would be a better question. Very rarely. I think, I don't believe in writer's block. I think that there's just sometimes when you just need to think a bit more and just figure out what the story is. Like I was saying, stories come from somewhere inside us. They're like so you don't, and sometimes it's got to form before it can come into your mind. I have no idea what I'm talking about. Who's your favorite author? From Harley, year 5, still AA middle. How long did it take for you to finish the book? That's from Gabriel. This is probably the last question, isn't it? It's 9:30. How long did it take for you to finish the book? It takes as long as it takes. I try not to, years rather than months, let's put it that way. Maybe a year and a half, something like that. But I try not to count the time, otherwise you go crazy, because it takes a long, if you're going to write a book with illustrations and have everything just as you want it, it takes a lot of work and a lot of time. So I try not to think about how long it takes, otherwise you might not ever start one.
Okay, well, I'm sorry we can't get through all of the questions, but there's some fantastic questions, and hope that you've learned a lot from the questions that Ben has answered, and I'm sorry I've got to bring the event to a close, but I'm conscious that there are so many other fantastic activities for you to take part in during the course of the day. And if you check out the Reading Agency website, you'll see all the wonderful things that are happening. On me to say a huge thank you to Ben's publisher, Simon & Schuster, and to the Association of Senior Children's and Education Librarians, ASCL, and Libraries Connected for their support for this event. Thanks to you all for joining us, because you're the ones that make these things work. Even though we can't see you, we know you're there, and thank you for your fab questions. And especially huge thanks to Ben for starting our day off in such a fantastic way. So wherever you are, can you, I know we can't hear you, but you can hear you, so can we give Ben a huge clap and a big cheer wherever you are?
Thank you. It's lovely chatting to you all. Have a wonderful day.
So enjoy the rest of today's activities, and remember, keep reading and keep reading together. So goodbye.